Hey guys, this is Eckhart's Letter. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Galactic Versus. And just like yesterday, today we have a very fun, very unique episode. Someone from my episode yesterday suggested that I put the race from Independence Day and the Independence Day sequel against someone from the Star Wars universe. And I will admit, initially I said no, both internally and in the comments, because I really didn't want to have to do a rewatch of the Independence Day sequel, but I knew in my heart that it was a good idea, so that is what we're doing today. Specifically, we're looking at whether the planet of Coruscant during the Republic era could survive an Independence Day style invasion. Specifically, we're going to be looking at a fleet kind of like the one that we see in Independence Day Resurgence, which, by the way, is a terrible name for a movie. I just realized I said Resurrection when it's actually Resurgence, but that's what happens when you have a generic title. It's Independence Day Resurgence. Anyway, so as I said, Coruscant with all of its forces, including its orbital fleet at the time of the Battle of Coruscant, will be invaded by the species from the Independence Day movies, who, by the way, are apparently called the Harvesters. In defending against the invasion, Coruscant will have access to all of the Jedi on the surface, as well as Chancellor Palpatine. However, unlike Earth in the Independence Day movies, Coruscant has never before had contact with the aliens, neither has anyone in the Star Wars universe. Anyway, before we get too far into the video, make sure that you guys take a second right now to post your comments and your suggestions for future videos down below. And some of you guys got on Random Guy last time for posting a bunch of suggestions. That is totally okay. He's one of the first guys here always because he sets notifications on. You guys can do the same. Feel free to post as many suggestions as you want. Typically, I will click love on the conversations that are actually on the topic of the video so they rise to the top. So don't worry about being spammed by not relevant comments. Also, if you did like this video, make sure to give it a like because I did admittedly have to sit through another entire screening of Independence Day Resurgence. I will say, all joking aside, it's not the worst movie of all time, but it is super generic, really predictable, and just very bland, kind of like one of the later Transformers movies. Anyway, onto the actual matchup itself. Let's talk basically about the Independence Day aliens. They're also called the Harvesters, as I mentioned, but I'll probably just call them the aliens or the Independence Day aliens throughout this video. The aliens are a very advanced, but also apparently quite biologically gifted species which has existed presumably for thousands of years. Their MO is to go to various planets, invading it, destroying the civilization, and harvesting their natural resources. I will admit I do kind of question this because presumably the amount of planets in the universe, or at least the galaxy, which are actually inhabited is minuscule compared to the total amount of material in the universe. But still, they've destroyed countless civilizations. In universe, the Harvesters have attacked Earth twice, once in 1996 and later in 2016. The initial invasion was much smaller than the later invasion. The aliens came in with a mothership, but a small variant of a mothership, as well as several city destroyers, and these are the events of Independence Day 1, which is, by the way, one of my favorite movies. Based on what we see in the second movie, this was likely a fairly paltry task force, although Earth still only squeaked out a victory by creating a computer virus which took down the shield of the alien mothership, which they then exploited by blowing it up. Still, the Earth lost almost half of its population, as well as most of its major cities, including, just for the record, the one that I'm living in right now. Really, the victory by Earth was only possible because of the Roswell incident, where one of the Harvester ships crashed on Earth, and with that technology, humanity was able to engineer that virus that I just mentioned. During the second invasion, which is the one that will be the basis for this episode, the Harvesters attacked again, this time with a bigger ship, specifically the Harvester mothership, which is at least 5,000 kilometers long. So yeah, the mothership is larger, although probably not as massive as the moon. The mothership effortlessly bypassed Earth's defenses, which at this point were quite powerful because they were based on reverse engineered technology which earlier was shown to basically blast a hole through the robotic ship body of another advanced alien species. The act of landing on Earth alone is heavily destructive to the planet, and once an EMP blast takes out much of Earth's defenses, really they are helpless. Earth only manages to secure a victory in this movie because they coax the Queen out of her ship, and they only do so because they have a good understanding of the alien technology, and they have help from another extraterrestrial species. they manage to kill the Queen, which causes the mothership to flee. So that's a brief history of this species. Because we're going off Independence Day 2, the only ship that will be used by the aliens will be the larger variant of the mothership. As I mentioned, this vehicle is gigantic at 5,000 kilometers long. It's massive enough that just the act of its landing, or even on a larger scale just by flying by something, messes with gravity and causes an immense amount of destruction. The defensive capabilities of these ships are also hard to fathom. We see in Independence Day 1 that a city destroyer, which is much smaller at only 25 kilometers, was able to tank a nuclear bomb quite easily. When you scale the ship up, you can just imagine how powerful the shield on the mothership would be. The ship also has a very impressive collection of flak turrets and fighters, both of which make a traditional attack pretty much impossible. Weapon-wise, the main purpose of the mothership is to drill into the planet, so it has its plasma-based boring laser, and should it manage to actually drill into the middle of the planet and extract the core, all life on the planet will cease to exist, and the planet itself physically will also most likely cease to exist. The thing is also capable of shooting energy bursts, as we saw when it destroyed the moon base in Independence Day 2, and has an impressive EMP system. I say impressive because not only does the EMP in Independence Day Resurgence manage to fry all of the craft and all of the satellites in space, but even the technology within hardened shelters like nuclear fallout bunkers ceases to work after the blast. The mothership also carries with it most likely thousands, if not millions, of individual strike craft, perhaps even more just due to its immense size. These ships are very fast, very maneuverable, have powerful weapons, and a dedicated energy shield. This energy shield is very powerful, and in Independence Day 1, the modern aircraft couldn't really take it down. However, in 2, after the development of alien technology, Earth's forces were able to take down individual craft in a one-on-one fight. And I'm going to assume that Star Wars ships can do so too, because fighters have pretty powerful lasers in the Star Wars universe. Aside from the ship, we also have the individual aliens themselves, the Harvesters. Harvesters wore a biomechanical suit which protected their insides and their more fragile bits. They stood quite tall, used powerful weapons, and could communicate telepathically with each other. It doesn't seem like they have traditional vocal cords or anything as that. Instead, they would communicate in their minds to all members of their hive, presumably. The Alien Queen is essentially a scaled up version of this, and when I say scaled up, I mean it, because she is huge. She also has presumably more powerful telepathic abilities. She's shown being able to control all of the drones and all of the starships that they use after her personal shield has been depleted by several fighters. It seems to me like she can not only directly control individuals, but also the technology that they use. So that's what the Star Wars universe is going up against today. I'm gonna very briefly, and I mean very briefly right now, talk about Coruscant and the defenses it would have had. So Coruscant was probably the most important world, not probably, it was the most important world during the time of the Republic. It housed trillions of people, including most of the government's political institutions. Protecting Coruscant primarily in this battle will be a fleet of 2,000 Venator-class Star Destroyers, as well as anyone on the planet's surface, including Jedi and Chancellor Palpatine, who can lend a hand. I'll discuss more on that as I look at the actual matchup, which is what I'm going to do right now. The main issue for the Star Wars universe in this matchup is that it lacks the primary thing that allowed humanity to win 2 matchups with the aliens in the Independence Day movies. That thing is information and knowledge of the aliens. In both movies, the Harvesters managed to absolutely and totally dominate humanity by conventional means. There was literally no way for them to fight back in Independence Day 1. One of the ships shrugs off humanity's most powerful weapon, the nuclear bomb, without even a second thought. In Independence Day 2, the giant ship is planted, it's ready to begin drilling, but the Queen basically says no, she wants to investigate something, which leads to her death. So here's how I see the battle going. The gigantic ship pops through a wormhole and appears in front of Coruscant, or perhaps somewhere in the star system, as it did in Independence Day 2. Immediately, the Venator and any orbital defense platforms turn and face the ship. However, the mothership, which is gigantic and must have almost unlimited energy, has its EMP. This blast most likely takes out a large portion of the local defense fleets. I think the ship should be able to continue onwards to the planet without too much difficulty. There will be some Venators left in space, and some of the fighters particularly will most likely engage the craft, but we know that the mothership has very powerful defense turrets, and that its starships are no slouches either. The thing is, without a super weapon, I just can't see the weapons on Coruscant or the starships above it injuring the ship in any sort of conventional way. It's just too large, it's too advanced, and it's too powerful. Once the ship actually enters the atmosphere and begins to land, the destruction on Coruscant will immediately be very, very dramatic. Coruscant is covered by a single city, unlike Earth where you can land and quickly hit dirt. On Coruscant you have a planet that is covered by a single city, and a city which is comprised mainly of structures that range in the kilometers to probably the tens of kilometers in height. At this point, Coruscant will most likely not have time on its side. In Independence Day 1, the aliens weren't actually harvesting the planet, so they weren't in any sort of rush. They were methodically destroying the resistance. In Independence Day 2, they could have started mining the planet, however the Queen was out doing whatever she was doing. Unless the Coruscanti have a super weapon hanging around, which I don't think they do, I mentioned that I don't think conventional weapons or really just brute force will work in this situation. That leaves basically the Jedi, Palpatine, and anyone else who's lying around that think that they can help. Unfortunately, they do not have the things that allowed humanity in the movies to win by unconventional means, as I already mentioned. I guess we have a few options. Palpatine could perhaps use a Force Storm. I think, however, that while these things are powerful, they are not large enough or powerful enough to destroy the mothership. Also, Palpatine has shown difficulty actually controlling these things, so he might just make the situation worse for those on Coruscant rather than actually helping the fight. I think the only chance that the Jedi have in this case is to use the Force to somehow figure out that the alien queen is controlling all members of the species and that with her death, the craft will retreat. This should be relatively simple. I mean, I would think that she is giving off some sort of pretty incredible presence given her pure psychic abilities. However, even if they do know the target, the question is, how do they kill her? I think that this is really going to be their biggest problem, and it's why I think more times than not, the Independence Day aliens will actually be successful. Specifically, I think if the invasion happens, the aliens win 7.5 times out of 10. I give very, very little chance for Coruscant to win by conventional means. Perhaps the Star Fleet really gets its crap together, they get some battle meditation going from some Jedi on the planet, and they are able to win, but I just think the mothership is too much for them. The more likely route to victory, as I mentioned, is the Jedi somehow pull something out after they identify the Queen. Perhaps they can use some sort of advanced or esoteric force technique to take her down. Less likely, perhaps they can all rush the ship, but that would be very, very difficult. Without plot armor, I think the Independence Day aliens quite easily take this matchup, especially if they're determined, they don't waste time, and they just start drilling the planet. I also meant to mention that the interior of the mothership is heavily protected and will make a traditional assault very, very difficult. We saw not only that it had impressive automated systems, but that it had technology and shielding which could enclose a cold fusion bomb, effectively rendering it harmless. Jedi are probably the best warriors in the galaxy, but they're going to have a very, very difficult time, not only fending against millions, if not billions, of harvesters, but also the automated defenses. All of this has been, however, simply my opinion. I would love to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the upper right hand corner right now who you think would win this matchup. Down in the comments, also let me know what you thought of this video, whether I got something wrong, whether you liked Independence Day Resurgence, because hey, I'm not judging you, and of course, any suggestions for future videos. Thanks again for the suggestions, by the way, guys. Without you, I would have ran out of ideas a long time ago. The channel would most likely be no more. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. As always, this has been Eckhart's Ladder. May the Force be with you.